Hello, everyone. I'm Mr. E.
And I am Bolton Mortimer, the Authenticator, and we are the Duality of Man.
Today, we're talking about the massive migration crisis. Basically, Western countries being essentially invaded by foreign citizens, and I think one of the biggest.
Willingly invaded, it seems, at least by at least according to the powers that be, because this is a different kind of invasion. Because much like the collapsing Roman Empire, we decided to go throw open the gates, or I guess Angela Merkel, Guy Verhofstadt, and Klaus Schwab and company decided to throw open the gates and go, "Come on in, all ye unwashed from the third world," and so on.
I think one of the major problems is that these things are being made. These decisions are being made by people who are capable of insulating themselves from the effects of these immigration policies to a degree.
Which again, not to be a stereotypical history-loving man or anything, but there are parallels here between the way Rome treated the Goths, Visigoths, and Celts, and the way we are currently treating Muslims in the Anglosphere and such.
It's just ridiculous. Like First, first off, why on earth would you allow people into your country who clearly do not care about your country or your people?
It's
Like,
not even that they don't care; they have active resentment and antipathy to Western culture. They call the West the Great Satan, for God's sake.
yes, it's like only bad things could come from this. Now, there are some people, like some people who are foreign to a nation, who might, you know, like that nation, like its history and culture, and may want to, go there and be a part of it. Like, I don't understand. I don't see people having a problem with those people who would want to be a part of that national identity.
And there's certainly a case to be made for, appending sort of pockets of foreign culture onto a mainline culture to give it depth, like the little Italies and Chinatowns of the 1920s and onwards, for example.
Yes, but the thing is, like the the Italians and the Polish and like the Chinese, like even though they had those little ethnic pockets, they wanted to be American and participate in American culture.
Yeah, they just wanted a uniquely to basically add some of their unique flavor to American culture, and that's irrespective of the fact, and I can hear Callum and Harry from the Lotus Eaters saying it now that America is about being the great melting pot. England and such don't have that. Like England hasn't been a melting pot since the days when King Arthur could have plausibly existed, back when the Angles, Normans, and Saxons were all mixing and things. That's that's the last time that England was in any way the kind of melting pot that the U.S. prides itself on being, and we do pride ourselves on being that. And I've heard speaking of the Lotus Eaters, I've heard them be very confused as to why um America prides itself on the legacy of being influenced by so many other cultures. And unfortunately, it's one of those things that you won't really understand unless you are American. That we are a nation of rebels. We are a nation of um, settlers and people who have come from other cultures and brought the best of that culture with them and then epitomized it in a new culture. In the same way as to many Americans, I think the British definition of monarchy is very confusing, but it's something that you probably won't understand unless you are an extreme Anglophile or in the British Isles.
Well, the thing about a melting pot is that the various ingredients have to melt and blend together and become one thing. If
Yeah,
the
and what
ingredients don't
one
melt,
of these ingredients desperately wants to be a poison to the rest
yeah,
of the dish. Like
like
unironically, there are Muslim terrorists and extremists who would gladly poison the food supply of the entire West if they had their druthers.
and you know when you have like all these people who not only do they just have animosity towards your countries, but are actively basically leeching off of the system. Like in the UK, they have a lot
in
of
order to
people.
replace it mostly,
The
which
thing is,
is a
like in the UK,
horrible
like
thing.
they have the National Health Service that is in constantly being told it's in critical condition. Why? Because they have more people using it than are contributing to it. Like the people who come there, like the people who come like on the boats from the English Channel, they can use the National Health Service, but they're also not paying money into it.
Yeah, and it's much like the problem that we have in the U.S. with illegal immigrants of people who are allowed to take advantage of the welfare state or social programs without actually having to pay into them. Now, granted, there will always be some aspect of that because there will always be disabled people who need state assistance to survive, um, that will not be able to pay into the system. But that's all the more reason to adopt the Polish approach to immigration. Namely, it is the burden of the person coming in to prove that they deserve to be here. Um, because the fewer illegals we have in any given system, the more smoothly those kind of welfare states and social programs can run. And as somebody who is nominally economically on the left, I would prefer if we could get a handle on this immigration nonsense because number one, it devalues the worth of work if you can hire an immigrant who will do it for pennies on the dollar. And two, because if we in the US or we in the Anglosphere are going to follow more closely to the Nordic model, as I would prefer, then we need to make sure that as many people as possible are paying into it and as few people as possible are being a net drag on said systems.
The whole immigration situation is just it's being made worse and worse by politicians who literally could not care less. Did you hear in New York that they're actually allowing non-citizens to vote in local elections?
Yes, I did. I also and again, maybe this is because I've been watching the Lotus Eaters a bunch recently. That there is the famous who is going to serve my coffee in Pret approach.
Like that's just an
Which implies that the modern day aristocracy has such a hatred for their own homegrown working class lads that they would rather, in defiance of all their hatred of imperialism and colonialism and the original sin of the transatlantic slave trade, um, in defiance of all of these high minded morals that they allegedly have, they would actually prefer a racially diverse underclass from the third world to their own homegrown working class lads.
I think one of the I think the problem is that in the modern day, like the working class now have protected rights, and so the aristocrats know that they can't just basically use them for cheap labor and discard them when they want. So they're
Yeah,
going to basically import an entire serf class from the third
that
world.
they
And if
can.
thing is like if they
We abolished slavery within our borders, so we just need to take some slave class underlings from other countries, and then we won't, and then we can simultaneously claim to be moral and good because our own citizenry doesn't abide under a slavery system, but we can also still have our slave class that we want. Now, mind you, I'm looking at this and going, even if you are this callous about basically having a third world, brown colored slave class, couldn't you just throw somebody into automation and AI and have machines be a underclass to humanity as a whole?
well here's
That seems like a much more sane and rational way of going about this. If you insist on having a slave class, don't have men as a whole do it. Don't have those those foreign brown third world men do it. Just have machines do it, and then all of humanity can live like the modern day middle class on the
Well,
backs of the labor of hopefully not artificially intelligent machines. Because do replace the slave class with machines. Do not, however, give them the ability to be conscious and feel pain about these things. Because if you give the robots the ability to be conscious and feel pain about these things, rather than creating specialized machines for automating different industries, well, we all know how that's going to go. We've seen The Matrix and Terminator and iRobot and all the rest of them. Do not give your alleged, mechanical slave class the ability to realize that they are a slave class. If you do that, then we are all fucked. If you don't do that, though, if you make them non-intelligent machines and replace with automation that way, then we can all live on par with the modern day, um, American middle class, and the machines need never be the wiser.
all right, but going back to the um, invading serf class, I think one of the reasons why they're doing this is because it's essentially a class of people that are disposable. Because when you think about it, what are these people going to do when they are upset about poor working conditions or poor pay? Are they going to protest? Because, well, they don't actually have a right to be in this country, so they can just deport them all if they start causing too much of a ruckus.
It's literally we've forced ourselves finally to bother having moral considerations for our own people. So we just need, but we still have the desire to have an underclass. So we'll just import a bunch of people who we don't have to have moral consideration for, all the while screaming diversity is our strength and that we do have moral consideration for those people. Again, it's one of those. How exactly is it that you could square the circle of diversity is our strength and we should have empathy for the foreigners and the third worlders while still simultaneously basically importing a third world brown slave class? Um, all the while automation and AI are um, options that you could be pursuing instead. Because that's the thing. If we didn't have AI, or we didn't, we weren't working slowly towards an automated future, I could almost understand this in the same way as I could almost understand the slave master's mentality before the advent of the cotton gin. But we do have the option of automation. We do have the option of AI. So why is it that you want third world brown people instead?
Well, there are some.
Methinks the aristocrats doth protest too much about their desire to be diverse.
Well, there are things that human beings are better at doing than to robots. Like, for
For
example, Uber
now,
Eats started using robots to deliver food. Those things just get attacked and robbed.
again, for now,
Yeah.
like, and again, it that would be a defense if we weren't dealing with long-term planning social planners who already have dozens upon dozens of Klaus Schwab shaped schemes for the future. Why is it none of those schemes for the future involve putting enough money into automation and AI that we can solve some of those problems with it? Why is it we we'll just import the foreign brown third worlders and that totally won't be a violation of our principles, all the while we claim diversity and equity and inclusion and blah.
One thing that also makes no damn sense is that when these people commit crimes, the provable crimes, whether it be the stabbings in Ireland and Paris or the sexual assault gangs in England, they don't get deported for
Yeah,
whatever fucking
no.
reason.
If that happens, it's either they don't know any better because they come from a foreign third world culture, or they shouldn't have to know better because their foreign third world culture is actually in some way better than the modern first world West.
Meanwhile, when you actually listen to these people and have translated transcripts of what they're actually saying, they absolutely know better. They just don't care because they don't give a damn about the nation or its people.
they do not they do not extend moral consideration to the, again, what they refer to generally as the great Satan.
Now,
By the
if
way,
this is
Satan
happening to one of
translates
their
from
own
an
people,
Arabic word meaning
they would absolutely
adversary, if
object.
anyone's curious. But oh well.
If what if what they are doing to the native population was done to one of their own people, they would be absolutely object and be absolutely furious.
They're furious now when they commit acts of terror and we treat them like they're acts of terror because they think they're in the moral right for doing these acts of terror and they don't think there's anything morally wrong with it because it, uh, you know, it is what God has willed, you know, Masha'Allah, as they say.
Now, let's get into something specific. I have an article here I mentioned before about the stabbing in Ireland. Well, let's see.
By the way, for as cucked as the British Isles in general are, Ireland might have them beat if recent events are to be believed.
I have to switch to a different article because apparently this is one of those news sites where you can only actually read the damn thing if you subscribe to them, which is fucking stupid.
Try looking for the archive version. I'm sure it exists somewhere. Archive.org, maybe.
All right. Hold on. Uh, I'm gonna pull up a different article. This is the Daily Mail. Let's see.
Hmm.
Suspect in Dublin stabbing was charged with knife possession in May this year, but never convicted. Let's see. The chief suspect arrived in Ireland from Algeria more than 2 decades ago. He has been an Irish citizen for more than 10 years now and was known to Garda. I guess that means like the police. The chief suspect in the multiple stabbings that left a 5-year-old girl fighting for her life was arrested earlier this year for possession of a knife, the Irish Daily Mail has learned. The man, originally from Algeria, had been living in Ireland for the past 3 decades. He took Irish citizenship more than a decade ago. The man, who is in his late 40s, has come to Garda attention several times in the past year. The latest incident involving possession of a knife, as well as criminal damage to a car in May. He was taken to court on the charges but did not receive a conviction. The Mail understands he was not convicted due to a mental health report given to the court. So they're saying that this guy was had mental health problems, and that's why he had to be let back out onto the street where he could
Okay,
stab.
but even if mental health is a thing, and it is sometimes, why is he not locked in a sanitarium or something? Like you, I would agree it's unethical to throw somebody with mental health issues in prison, but that's what mental hospitals are for, surely. Like, am I the asshole? I think I might be the asshole, but like, just because he's mentally ill doesn't mean he gets off scot free for doing whatever he wants. Like, this would be one of those cases where you commit them to a mental hospital, preferably a relatively high security one.
Sources have told this newspaper that the man was living in Dublin City Council hostel accommodations before he went on the rampage off Parnell Square on Thursday afternoon. The suspect remains in hospital after he was tackled to the ground and subdued by passersby. The passerby specifically was a Brazilian delivery driver who got off his bike and I think started beating the guy with his helmet. So
It's a
shout out to
bloody
him.
good thing he didn't die from it, or we would have the Islamic equivalent of George Floyd on our hands.
Let's see. Sources have told this newspaper that the man. Let's see. The suspect remains in hospital after he was tapped to the ground and subdued by passersby. Officers are guarding the man. It is believed he will be arrested and formally questioned over the attack, which shocked the nation when he is passed fit by medics. Arrest him now and send him to fucking prison. They have They have hospitals in prison. Screw it.
And again, even if you want to play the mental illness card, high security, like, mental health hospitals exist. Send him to one of those, if nothing else. Like, this is what psychological committing is for, surely. Like, do we actually just need to straight up create a real world version of Arkham Asylum for these people, the literal criminally insane?
Possibly. I mean, didn't they do away with the insane asylums over the, you know, idea that just because someone's having a mental health episode doesn't mean that you can restrain them against their will?
Yeah, but you can still be psychologically committed to a mental health hospital. And there are high security, like, mental health hospitals. Even even though they're not sanitariums, they are still basically a mental health prison, which, for most mental health issues is thoroughly unnecessary. But in cases like this, when it has been conclusively demonstrated that mental health or no mental health, this person is a danger to civilization, then this is what committing is for, surely. Like, put him in the padded cell and drip him out on Thorazine if you absolutely must. Seriously. It's
Yeah.
it's better than prison, and it's certainly better than having him literally free to be a mental health nuisance to all of civilization. I mean, I've heard of the inmates running the asylum, but could it be the tiniest bit less literal?
Also, just I believe I heard in interviews about some brief history of the suspect that I don't think he has ever had a job in his time in Ireland. It mentioned in the article that he was living in a county hostel. Um, I think he's been. I'm pretty sure that over the years he's been charged with numerous crimes that still did not end up in his arrest. And I think it was actually an NGO that found his paperwork for that to allow him to stay in Ireland. And my God, I hate immigration NGOs. I swear to God, they are the bane of society.
Again, it's literally, come on in, horde of Visigoth raiders, come on in, angry Celts. It
Yeah,
surely won't affect Rome at all that you're here and getting military training or anything.
yeah.
Oops.
Immigration NGOs are funded and operated by people who don't have to deal with immigrants on a daily basis.
Which, again, it's not even necessarily the immigration that's the issue. It's these people are literal goddamn hostile invaders, and they're being welcomed with open arms.
Yeah, the thing is,
I mean, there's something that has to be said for such a thing as cultural compatibility. I'm not
thing is,
saying get rid of all the French immigrants who want to immigrate to England for whatever reason, or the Polish or the Romanians, but certainly get rid of the people who literally think of the Western culture as an adversary.
they always try and support them like when they go the illegal route. They never want to try to get more based Cubans in the United States. I think I remember Joe Biden saying that when Cuba was having that little
Attack of, we want democracy and we want to actually matter to our governments.
yeah, when there was a dust up in Cuba, the Biden administration I think said specifically that we wouldn't be taking in Cuban refugees. Meanwhile, all these other people who literally are not refugees coming to the southern border, they're busting them all over the place.
Yeah, the drug mules, the human trafficking, and the cartel stewards, they can come, but someone who actually seems to respect and love the American way of life and wants to escape from a totalitarian nightmare in a very close to third world island country, no, they are the scum of the earth. They are not permitted here for some reason.
Now,
They,
getting back to Ireland for a little bit, I actually have a quote from a city councilor. Uh, I believe his party in Ireland is called Fianna Fáil. I can't speak Gaelic, but this is what he had to say. Um, this is what he had to say regarding the riots that followed the stabbing, because, as I'm sure you can imagine, the population of Ireland was freaking outraged that this guy stabbed a child and could have been kicked out like decades ago, and yet we're allowed to stay and even gain citizenship. But this counselor said, in regards to the riots, I strongly believe that this is not the face of Ireland. This is just some criminals looting the shops. I don't think they follow any ideological purpose. They come to the streets and just rob. They should get punishment. Not even an animal does these kinds of things. It is very shameful, and they should get public punishment. I'd like to see them shot in the head or bring the public in and beat them until they die.
okay, so angry Irishmen
I don't
marching to
even
the
think he's an
beat.
Irishman.
Yeah, but
I think looking at this guy's picture, I think he's actually a yep. I can actually tell that this guy is not Irish. His name is Abu Kalam Azad Talukder.
yeah, but okay. Just to recap, foreign invader stabs little girl within an inch of her life. He had a rap sheet several decades long and was basically a mentally unstable tragedy waiting to happen. But he did nothing wrong according to Ireland as a whole. But the people angry at him for said stabbing of little girl and said rap sheet several decades long, they are inhumane, far right, something, something, somethings. Does that seem like the right way around to you, Ireland? Because I have to tell you, maybe it's the Scotsman in me, but I don't think that's the right way around. I think something has gone very screwy in that situation.
You like, I think one of the things that have been lost in our in people's, I think, misguided pursuit of some sort of global community is that a country belongs to its people. The nation of Ireland, the land of Ireland, belongs to the Irish people. The nation of
And
England,
they belong to it as well.
yeah,
Like,
the nation of England belongs to the Englishmen. France belongs to the Frenchmen. Germany belongs to the Germans, etc., etc. Like, no other, no outsiders have the right to someone else's country. Even if I were to say go to Ireland, and I would be very respectful of the Irish people and their culture, if they wanted to be gone, I'd have no choice but to leave because it's not my home. It's not
now,
my
I think you'd have more of a case because I don't foresee you breaking any laws. Certainly not on this scale.
I definitely break those new hate speech laws they put in place.
Yeah, well, those laws are helping no one but people who actively hate the country they are in and want to see it improved by the barrel of a immigration flavored gun as and when they feel like it.
But like, this guy is supposed to be an elected representative of the Irish people, and when they get upset about one of their children being stabbed, this is his response. Like,
Yeah, no.
it,
I'm gonna use a metaphor that Terry Pratchett came up with in the book I Shall Wear Midnight. He referred to the kind of anger that these Irishmen were displaying as the rough music, which is basically what happens when a people feel like they're not being represented by the powers that be, and like the justice system is not bending in their favor. And yet, no, the rough music is not an immoral wrong in most cases. What's wrong is that someone stabbed a little girl and had had several other instances of mental instability and thereby a rap sheet 1,000 miles long, and they didn't even think to get to psychologically commit him. Like I don't I can sympathize with the idea of we shouldn't put mentally ill people in prison, if for no other reason than it would harm the other prisoners. But there are high security mental institutions for a reason. There is such a thing as being psychologically committed for a reason. And if someone is so mentally unstable that they literally end up stabbing children, irrespective of their gender, um, no, like this is what commitment. This is what that kind of commitment is for. Like, by no means am I saying go back to the 1940s when being a homosexual was considered mentally deviant enough to get you locked in a sanitarium and taken care of by Nurse Fricking Ratchet or Annie Wilkes as and when they felt like it. But when mental instability is such that you wind up hurting yourself and others on a mass scale, no, it's actually better and more humane for you to be taken care of by people who know how to take care of you, and for you to not have access to things like weapons and knives and shit. And not to rub take that gun control advocates in the wound here, but you want to tell me again how if we just ban all the guns, we won't have to deal with mass murder anymore? Because apparently mass stabbing is very easily a thing now, and
yeah, and in a way, it's even more dangerous than guns because there's no loud, gunshot to alert the rest of the public when you're attacking somebody with a knife. Knives are silent.
also guns can kill at a distance. But if you want to get into a fight with the person trying to stab you, even if you have a knife or a sword of your own, it's still likely that you're going to be just as injured by trying to fight off the stabber as you are from getting stabbed. Whereas with a gun, if you see someone else with a gun, you can shoot them either to injure them or fatally and not get shot yourself, ideally.
I think that I think I believe I read a statistic somewhere that said um in situations of a armed shooter, I think that 30 something percent were stopped by a civilian with a gun, and it goes even higher because if you exclude gun free zones where civilians are not allowed to have guns, that number rises to like I think 50 something percent.
Yeah, but by no means are we saying go full Wild West and have everyone be, Wyatt Earp, but surely it's better for people to be armed and to be able to defend themselves in such situations than it is for them not to be. And again, if you remove all the guns, it would just become stabbings. And in the case of stabbings, who wins the knife fight is down to who is more vicious, who is more deranged, and who is physically more powerful. And I don't like those odds. The gun is far, in some ways, the gun is far more civilized than the knife. And I would love to go back to the world where everyone had a sword in their cane somewhere, but that world is several centuries in the rearview mirror at this point. and you're never going to get the gun genie to go back in the bottle at this point. We can't just go back to everyone carrying around a sword. As much as I would love to.
I think one of the reasons that you foreign crime is such a pervasive problem is that in many of these countries they know the populace is unarmed.
Hmm.
I think a lot of these problems stem from the fact that they know that the populace cannot easily defend themselves, and even if they try, like the media and politicians will then just paint them as the bad guy. Like these people aren't stupid. Like they know that they can get away with certain things because the politicians are stupid enough to let them.
And they say as much when we bother to get a translator in there. The basic gist of it is, well, if the Westerners are too weak and too hung up on their own moral feelings to do anything, then sucks to be them, basically.
There are times when I believe that when a situation gets, you know, so bad that liberal democracies are no longer capable of solving them. One situation would be El Salvador. Do you remember the situation there?
Vaguely, I don't remember the specific details.
Well, El Salvador was a very poor country. It had one of the worst gang problems in the entire world. But then they elected a new president who said, I will do whatever it takes to save this country, damn perception and damn the consequences. And so what he did was he started like mass arresting these gang members and anybody who he saw had gang tattoos. The thing is, they mark these tattoos all over their entire body, so like they're very easily identifiable.
Yeah, it's not like they're being subtle or hiding away from respectable society.
Yeah, so he just started like mass arrests of these people, even if he didn't necessarily have like massive amounts of evidence on them. He still like just we'll sort it out later, round them up, put them in prison. And you know what's happening now? El Salvador is a much safer country. Like it's becoming more prosperous. People can walk down the streets with their children, and there are even lots of people who came to the U.S. who are now moving back to El Salvador because the country is doing so much better.
Well, and here's the other end of it before we get called, authoritarians in waiting or some shit. This these invasions also make it hard for anyone who does legitimately emigrate from the Middle East or the Third World to the West. Because let's say, for example, you're an atheist who lives in a Muslim country and you manage to get out of said Muslim country to the West where you will no longer be persecuted for being an atheist. Or let's say you're a Christian in a Muslim country or a pagan, or it doesn't really matter. Given that under Sharia, and most of these countries do operate under some form of Sharia, apostasy is a crime worthy of death, as is as is other forms of heresy, like simply having a different interpretation than whatever the dominant interpretation of your religion is, or the beheading for sorcery, the throwing off of buildings of people with homosexual tendencies, etc. Well, if you are one of those people, one of the people who interpret spirituality or lack of spirituality or sexuality differently from Sharia, your hope, at least in the old days, was to get out and get to a non-Muslim country like the Anglosphere or the rest of Europe. Now, though, because there is such a high percentage of illegal or undocumented immigration, which we, for the sake of rhetoric, are calling invasion, you're not actually getting away from the the worst of what the Muslim world has to offer when you go to a Western country, because in most Western countries, not only is it um, Islam, which has an antipathy towards the West kind of in general anyway, but very often, to quote former President Trump, they send over here whoever they don't like dealing with, which very often does lead to the most radicalized, most theocratic, most terroristic form of Muslims coming over here, taking advantage of the goodwill of the Western world, and then proceeding to turn sections of major cities in these countries into third world slums. And in many cases, the Sharia that they enforce, these radicals enforce, is in many ways more oppressive and authoritarian than the Muslim world countries that they left.
Yeah,
And
well,
how is that fair to the Arabic apostate or the Arabic homosexual or the Arabic practitioner, say here or something, to throw them from one Muslim theocracy into an inner city where they will still be subject to a possibly even worse Muslim theocracy.
let's see. Let me read you an article. This is regarding Paris. I believe it was an interview with French President Emmanuel Macron. It says at least half of Paris crime is committed by foreigners. See, the French president stated in a television interview that foreigners. Let's see, hold on, this was like over a year ago, so it might actually be worse. The president stated in a television interview that foreigners, either illegal immigrants or waiting for a resident permits, accounted for more than half of the crime in the capital. Question about his handling of deportation orders after the murder of a 12-year-old Parisian girl, Lola, Jesus, where the suspect is an Algerian national subject to such an order. Again, it's the same country that the dude from Ireland was from. See, French President Emmanuel Macron tried to defend his record on crime in an interview on French 2 television channel on Wednesday, October 27th. This was in 2022. After he promised to tighten the rules on immigration, journalist Caroline Rowe asked him if the uh, Minister of the Interior, Cheryl Darmanin, he saw a link between crime and immigration. President Macron first refused to acknowledge a substantive link between the two or to generalize. On the other hand, looking at crime, for example, in Paris, where there is a high concentration of illegal immigration for a geographical and bureaucratic reason, it's very evident in the crime figures, he said, voicing concerns about nuances and having a feeling for the truth on such a sensitive subject. Let's see. To illustrate his claim, Mr. Macron cited a statistic. If we look at crime in Paris today, we cannot fail to see that at least half of the crime comes from people who are foreigners, either illegal immigrants or waiting for their residence permits. In any case, they're in a very delicate situation, often coming in through these illegal immigration channels.
You know, as someone who considers himself quite the Francophile and quite the Anglophile, it genuinely pisses me off that I will never probably get to go to England or France, but not because I'm unable to do so, although at the moment I am obviously somewhat unable to do so. But even if I were able to do so, even if I won the lottery tomorrow, the England or the France, the London or the Paris that I would be going to visit would be just as likely to get me stabbed for, either being a homosexual or for being an occultist as
Or
it
being
would
disabled in
if
some
I were
cases.
to go to the lowest slums of Saudi Arabia. And that's not okay. Not to mention that the England or the English or French culture that I love, that I want to experience if I ever go over there, is slowly being eroded by Muslim culture. And I'm not even opposed to Muslim culture. I would love to go to Egypt someday, or I would love to go to one of the more secular Muslim countries. But if I want to go to Saudi Arabia or Egypt, I would prefer to go to Saudi Arabia or Egypt, not go to London and then find myself in a third world Muslim slum.
And it's just, I think, like, this is like the same thing that is damaging a lot of countries, economically. Like these politicians, they adopt these idiotic policies, and when they evidently do not work, they don't even bother reversing them. It's almost as if the destruction is the entire point.
Or that they think that theoretically the destruction shouldn't be a thing, and therefore they ignore the evidence right in front of their eyes because they're a bunch of pseudo intellectual aristocrats who think that abstraction matters more than literal truth. Therefore, the literal truth being inconvenient can just be explained away. It's it's not it's not the you know theocratic Muslims that's the far right threat to our democracy. It's the patriotic Englishman or the patriotic Frenchman or the patriotic Scotsman or insert patriotic group here as long as they're from a Western first world country or the Anglosphere.
Yeah, I mean, not only that, but we certainly have enough, useful idiots taking up, foreign causes that they know damn near nothing about.
A-
Uh,
And I,
whatever
I
these,
hate to be
what,
I hate to once again be the asshole, but if you're truly worried about the far right ooga booga, um, I hate to burst this particular bubble, but Muslim theocracies are several orders of magnitude more traditionalistically right wing than any any patriot in any Western country.
they're also significantly more punitive.
Yeah, it's like imagine taking a snapshot of what society was like during the ninth century Crusades. There are very few differences between modern day Muslim countries and the ninth century Crusades. The only difference is that modern day Muslim countries are more dangerous because they have access to things like Western technology. Like, how much worse would have the Crusades gone if somebody had given Saladin uh, a 44 Magnum? Because I don't foresee that the Crusades would have been any less bloody if they had guns. It would have been much worse. And more dangerous than that, they would have been much more effective.
Yeah, and that's it. The useful idiots really grate my nerves. I saw a video earlier this week of this old woman who is standing on the street holding a Palestinian flag. And when the guy recording the video asked her what she was standing for, you know what she said?
I can't even imagine what was the excuse.
And I quote, "From the mountains to the sea, Palestine will be free," is what she said. From the mountains to the sea.
I Isn't it from the river to the sea?
Yes,
It's supposed to be the line.
it's almost as if this woman has no idea what she's actually talking about.
Well, okay, and here's the thing, and I guess we can't beat around this particular bush any more than we already have. With regards to the Israel-Palestine conflict, yes, the Israelis did definitely overstep their bounds and definitely are being way too punitive to the Palestinians. But did we forget that Palestine is one of the aforementioned quasi-third world Muslim countries that want the entire world to be under the aegis of Sharia? Because I'm not in the business of making excuses for Israel, but I don't want to live under a Muslim theocracy either. Like, why is it we have to pick sides on this? Why is it we have to say either Israel or Palestine did nothing wrong? Can we not just go with the option of I hope they both kill each other so we no longer have to deal with either of them? Because
Mm.
for as barbaric as Israel might be being because they have superior technology, can you honestly sit there and tell me that if the balance were more equal, you wouldn't be getting jihad every 5 minutes against
No,
the Israelis?
no, I'll say this outright. If the Palestinians had more military strength than the Israel, Israel would have been wiped off the map already.
Yes. Which leads us back to the why do we have to pick a side here anyway? We either have an overbearing Western ally misusing Western technology for heinous humanitarian criminal ends, or we have a Muslim theocracy that would gladly, if it given the option, make the entire planet said Muslim theocracy. And I don't want to live under the rule of Israel, but I don't want to live under the rule of an Islamic theocracy either. So
Well,
how
to be
about
fair,
neither?
you wouldn't even live under the Islamic theocracy.
Yeah, it would be a race between the people who hate the gays and the people who hate sorcery to decide whether I get thrown off a building or whether I get beheaded first.
Well,
And that's not even excluding the option of being tortured considerably beforehand for being both of these things simultaneously.
it also the thing like I don't understand how these people can like just throw their like blind support behind a group who would gladly see them all like basically put to death if
I
they had
can
the
under
power to do so.
I can understand it to some degree because I remember being a millennial um at towards the beginning of like the 9/11 thing. Um a lot of left-wing millennials and even probably a certain percentage of zoomers, their first exposure um to what it meant to be multicultural or compassionate was being being supportive of Muslims in defiance of the like Bush era warmongering. So that's why a lot of them are surprisingly pro-Muslim and anti-Israel. Both because to their pseudo-intellectual way of thinking, because Israel is a Western ally, they are a extension of the West, and because they view the West as evil, then Israel, by its very nature, must also be evil. But also because a lot of them grew up in the shadow of the Bush years when Bush was being a warmongering fuckhead, and so one of their first exposures to what it meant to be left wing and compassionate was have sympathy for the Muslims because they're brown and third world. So that's at least part of the explanation of why. One, because Israel is a Western ally, and that makes them somewhat accountable to the Western evils. And two, because um, I grew up in the Bush years, and having compassion to the Muslims is the first excuse I ever had to be politically compassionate.
Uh, I'm pretty sure back when I was a kid in those days, I'm pretty sure I was much, much, much more pro America than you. Obviously, I was not like a raging warmonger. That was like 9, but I didn't really I didn't really feel the need to be politically compassionate because like I learned at a pretty young age that people are not monoliths. So like
I
like
know, but what we're talking about is the millennial sort of left sphere, and I think a lot of them grew up forming a dichotomy in their heads of either evil American Western warmongers and poor put upon Muslim third world people.
well, here's the thing, like I remember hearing like news stories about Muslims Americans being facing you know abuse and
Discrimination because
yeah,
it
but
was
it's
it
not
was the
something that
middle
I
of a
ever
war.
really saw day to day. So I don't think it's ever something that I really connected to.
No, and I didn't either. I was just sort of giving a voice to what I think drives a lot of these people, because I know a lot of people that I grew up with are definitely in the camp of their first exposure of what it meant to be like anti-establishment and also compassionate to people who weren't Americans was Bush hates Muslims as a whole, so feel compassionate to the Muslims.
Well, the thing is though, like even if that's how things were viewed back then, like in 2023 we have more information regarding these different cultures. So we have you know internet, social media, like more independent news sources, so we know like their views on things like you know non-Muslims or homosexuals. So we know like what they view of the a lot of the radical left people who are throwing their support behind them. And
Yeah,
so like you can't really claim ignorance about what these people believe about you and like still give them like all this support.
yeah, but these people, keep in mind, are the same people who started with that sort of Bush era antipathy to the U.S. and compassion for the Muslims, and then they went to college where social justice was the order of the day, and so now when they see terrorism coming from Muslim countries, they view those people as literally not real Muslims, or cherry picking outliers.
How it makes no sense for them to not be real Muslims when they literally live in a Muslim theocracy.
Because they were exposed to the Quran when they were in, the very social justice tinged college, so they on some level actually think they know the Quran better than the Islamic terrorists, and thereby the Islamic terrorists are the ones misinterpreting the Quran. Never mind that they would never ever allow that excuse to go for extremely fundamentalist Christians being the ones who mistreat. This is the thing. A lot of these people also grew up with the sort of Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, new atheist approach, and so a lot of them really grew to hate fundamentalist Christianity. But here's the cognitive dissonance part. They hate the Bible because it represents everything that they view as oppressive. But because of the aforementioned, we have to have compassion for the Muslims, they view the Quran as this cool, exotic thing, and therefore it must be better than the Bible. Even though, in many ways, if you've actually read the freaking thing, you know that the Quran is everything bad about the Bible on steroids.
It's far more restrictive and far more brutal as well.
because because unlike Christianity, Islam actually was born during um, wars in the Middle East. Like Muhammad was a warlord, basically.
Now, let me ask you something. Like regarding the immigration crisis that's going on, do you think there's ever a chance of expelling this dangerous, invasive element, or do you think it's unfortunately here to stay?
I think if we all go more akin to like Poland or Hungary's immigration style, um, we could easily see a lot of the criminal ones being thrown out. And again, I am under no circumstances saying get rid of all the foreigners. I again am a red-blooded American, and therefore the methodology of the Great American Melting Pot is tattooed onto my soul somewhere. But certainly, I would argue, even for the sake of the proper law-abiding immigrants, we need to get rid of the non-law-abiding, non-legal immigrants. Because again, if you're, say, a Muslim apostate, and you want to escape to the first world or the Anglosphere because it embraces like liberal values or secularism or pluralism or something. And we basically shunt you off into a Muslim ghetto that happens to be in the first world for some reason. That doesn't help the Majid Nawazes or the Imam Tuidis when the worst terrorists are not actually found in their home countries, but they're found in the Western countries they should be escaping to. For the sake of the immigrants who actually deserve to be here, I think we should shun any that don't.
Uh, one thing that I've noticed is that a lot of the people who are for these like great immigration policies very usually have very poor familial relationships. Either they are like basically rebelling against the parents that they grew up against, or like many of them um, don't have kids, don't want kids, and therefore don't feel any tie to like something more valuable than themselves other than their politics.
Not to mention, they're most of them utopian ideologues. It's the same set of people who will swear up and down the virtues of the capital W, capital C working class, but if they ever actually meet someone who's from the working class who disagrees with them, they view them as the scum of the earth. It, it's the same people who want to view the working class in like a Hegelian or Marxian lens, um, while simultaneously hating country folk or Trump supporters. And it doesn't even occur to them that the the ideological conception of the working class and the IRL, on the ground existence of the working class are opposed concepts usually. Again, it's the mentality of, well, I read the Quran once in college, and therefore I must know the Quran better than all these uh, all these violent, crazy Muslims. But oh, obviously, when violent, crazy Christians do violent, crazy Christian things, is because the Bible is bad
Well,
for some reason.
the way I'm putting it together is that you know they they want to be defenders of the downtrodden, but the natural downtrodden of a country, its working class, hold views that are basically the antithesis of their own. And so what they're going to do is like import a class underneath that they can be, sympathetic to and pretend to champion, and that underclass will support them because they're the ones giving them all the shit that they don't deserve.
It pisses them off so bad. I have run into a couple of like the Voshites on the internet who are so pissed off that the actual existent working class don't view themselves in the capital W capital C working class style of Marx. They view them as so brainwashed and so idiotic that they don't even see that class consciousness, quote unquote, should be a thing. It's literally, I know how to be working class better than you working class people do. Now stop. Now stop being such belligerent reactionaries and become class conscious. Damn it.
Well, the thing is that like, growing up in a working class family, one of the things I realized that a lot of people don't give a damn that somebody else is rich as long as they themselves and their families are doing okay. Like sure, this guy's a lot of money, but me and my family, we're doing all right. They won't care, but they
This
do
is
care if everything is on fire and they're struggling to make ends meet because of the bullshit policies that people like Vosh are constantly advocating for.
this is why I maintain until my dying day that I am a social democrat and not a socialist, because I actually do give a shit about the working class, not as some abstract hive mind ideal, but as people that I've actually spoken to. And as a result of that, I know that all of Marx's and Engels' theoretical posturings are bullshit. The average working class lad is far more likely to be a populist and a libertarian or classical liberal than they are to be a good, card carrying member of the proletariat. Which means you can either choose to believe that the working class are brainwashed and misguided for not being class conscious, or maybe Marx and Engels didn't know what the fuck they were talking about. I tend to lean more in the second option than the first one. But so many people love the abstract idea of things and despise the literal translation of those things instead of using the literal translation of those things as a guidepost for how to form a conception of those things. It's absolutely foobar and bass backwards.
Yeah, unlike a lot of the working class people, because they're working class, actually have to solve like problems and not just theorize about hypothetical scenarios.
Yeah.
And
They
so
they
like when
actually have to work for what they have. So obviously they have enough empathy for other people to know that they don't want their shit taken away, so it's unethical to take away someone else's shit. And again, this is why I'm a social democrat, because I've always believed that rather than the eat the rich TM mentality, don't eat the rich, raise up the poor, because most of the problems of being poor are down to things like quality of life and the fact that nobody really gives a shit about the quote unquote little guy. So we could viscerally hate the rich and tear them down, or we could raise up the floor. We could either tear down the ceiling or we could bring up the floor so that it's much closer to the ceiling. Because my thought process is if we live in a future where the average working class lad lives the life of luxury of the modern day, middle class in the first world, then that's job done. It doesn't matter how much wealth the richest of the rich increase. Like if we're living in a utopia here on Earth, it doesn't matter that Elon Musk and company have a moon base out there somewhere. The thing that's bad about, you know, um, wealth inequality is not that too many people have too much. It's that so many people don't have nearly enough. But if we could fix the system so that the people on the lowest rung had enough to get by on and even, be happy with, then it wouldn't matter that the rich would get richer as a result. It's not the fact that the rich get richer that's the problem. It's the fact that the poor keep getting poorer.
and I apparently get more and more poor whenever people try and take this like massive beast that is an economy in a country that should focus on that should operate on like natural laws of causality essentially and just
Yeah,
try
but
to steer
again,
it and force it where they want it to go. It just ends up causing more problems.
the famous the deadliest line in the English language is "I'm from the government. I'm here to help." By the way, did you see that someone actually took that quote out of context and tried to make it sound like it's a good thing?
Who?
Um, who was it? That I want to say it was a Canadian politician, but I might be mistaken. Um, or no, it was a senator from I want to say Virginia, but I might be wrong. Um, he actually used Kennedy's quote of "I'm from the government, I'm here to help," but he completely divorced it from the context of that being a bad thing. I didn't know about it until I saw a video on it. I'll have to send you the video.
God, I hate Canada so much. Not even necessarily the Canadian people, but I do blame them still for Trudeau.
Yeah, yeah, Justin Trudeau and his sympathies for Mr. Klaus Schwab, like someday someone is going to write a very scathing or a very scathing biography on Justin Trudeau, and it's going to be called Klaus Schwab's Apprentice.
I don't know if I don't know if apprentices are required to kiss ass that much.
They do when their master is basically the real world equivalent of Palpatine. Actually, no, I take it back. Klaus Schwab is basically the bastard love child of Blofeld from James Bond and Palpatine.
I'd also throw in Lex Luthor, just a bit.
It the problem there is Lex actually when he might be evil on the grand scheme, but he genuinely tries to help people on the smaller scale, and I don't think Klaus Schwab I don't think Klaus Schwab has any of Luthor's good qualities, because for all of Luthor's evil, he does actually have a few good qualities. Let's not give Klaus too much credit here. I just realized the other day that for all that the idea of Soylent Green being made of people is bad, we would be so lucky to have Soylent Green be made of people. In our increasingly more likely possible future, Soylent Green is not made of people; it's made of the bugs,
I
which is
refuse.
much worse, actually.
Yeah, just for that, I'm having steak tomorrow.
Yeah, Soylent Soylent Green being made of people would be a luxury item in our possible future. More likely, Soylent Green or its equivalent is going to be made of the bugs.
I just thought of who Trudeau reminds me of in regards to his relationship with Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. You know the character of Renfield?
Yes.
He, Trudeau is Renfield, with Schwab being Dracula.
Yes. That actually does make sense. Which reminds me, does anybody have a wooden stake anywhere? Because the world would be better off if it had one less Schwab in it.
Yeah,
Like,
I think it'd be better off if he just was not allowed to use his money to influence like other countries' national politics.
yeah, but George Soros has already bribed, bought, and butchered everyone who would possibly make that allowance. So, like, I keep thinking of American Gods because there's a character in it that's called Mr. World, and he's basically the embodiment of like globalization and globalism. And I keep in my own head referring to people like Klaus Schwab, Guy Verhofstadt, and George Soros as like high priests of Mr. World because that makes far too much sense. And yes, by
Like,
the way, Mr. World is basically the main villain of American Gods, if anyone hasn't either read the book or seen the show.
so, do you have any final thoughts about these mass migration problems across the West?
Poland seems to be doing quite well, and Hungary seems to be doing quite well. Why don't we here's my goal for the future. The West takes cues from the Nordic model economically, but it takes cues from Poland and Hungary in terms of its immigration policy. If we could get to there, we would actually have a decent potential for a positive future.
Well,
And
the
also,
Poles.
instead of importing the foreign brown third worlders, can we not just get robots to do those things?
Well, the thing is, like a lot of the jobs that are being taken, by foreign workers are jobs that teenagers used to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like that woman who said, who's going to serve your coffee and
Coffee and
crap.
Pretz.
Yeah, just get a teenager to do it. It'll be their first job, and they'll make a little cash.
Yeah, but that would require actually caring about the IRL working class and not just the working class TM, which is foreboding, don't you know? That's not how you be a good moral person in this day and age. Academia says so.
In regard to the Poles, I think that they learned their lesson pretty hard thanks to the Germans last century.
Yeah. Which, speaking of Germany, sort your shit out. You don't have to go full Nazi to give a shit about your own people. But neither is anyone helped by you beating yourself with a white guilt lash and throwing open your borders.
Yeah. All right, everybody. I have been Mystery.
I have been Dalton Mortimer, the Authenticator, and we have been the Duality of Men. Cheers, guys.
Bye, everybody.